a program of free events that invites local, national, and sometimes the occasional international speaker and leaders to address vital urban issues and concerns for our city's future. Tonight's is the final of 4 conversations from 2023. And I'd like to thank those who have made, let's see if it works, a little too fast for me, thanks Em, those who have made tonight's event possible. He Whakawhiti Kōrero Christchurch Conversations is funded through the Christchurch City Council Sustainability Fund and supported by He Puna Ora Regenerative Action Lab at AUT. And it's a pleasure to have Amanda Yates here from that lab with us tonight. So tonight you're going to hear some very brief presentations, one of which is a video, from 4 people who are contributing in different ways to improving wellbeing in cities. Amanda Yates, the director of He Puna Ora, this urban wellbeing action lab based in AUT's Huri Te Ao, the School of Future Environment. Joseph Hullen, who you've already heard from, Anna Stevenson, a public health physician at Te Mana Ora, Te Whatu Ora, Waitaha, and Malcolm Long, secretary of the Ōpāwaho Heathcote River Network. They'll speak in that order. And as we very much wanted to leave as much time for discussion and questions, their presentations tonight are really short, somewhat frustratingly so, but it does allow us plenty of time for conversation. Tonight they're going to first simply introduce themselves in relation to, and their expertise and work in relation to the topic. And then after those individual presentations, they will have a panel with a Q&A session facilitated by Courtney Bennett, who's been a friend of Te Pūtahi for many years now. She's a Christchurch-based environmental planner and director of Kete Planning Consultancy. And that's when you'll be able to ask questions as well. And then we finish with some poetry from Isla Huia. So whether you're attending this online or if you're in the room, you can ask the panel questions by texting your question to this number, 020 411 09415. You can record the number now and it will also be on screen during the Q&A. To our online audience, you have the option to ask questions via the chat function on YouTube as well, and questions from both sources are conveyed to the panel by the Te Pūtahi team. Apologies in advance, there's every chance we won't be able to put all your questions to the panel. So if we can, we'll ask the panel to provide written answers, if that's possible, that we'll post on social media after the event. Tonight, we've asked our speakers to discuss how urban, human-made systems might better support the well-being of both humans and that thing that we keep calling nature. And I don't like using that distinction, as it seems to suggest that humans aren't part of and completely dependent on wider ecosystems or reciprocal living systems. It reinforces part of the centuries-old, largely European Judeo-Christian concept that humans are separate from or dominant over other living things. We've spent much of the last 3 years of Christchurch Conversations talking about or around parts of this topic, and tonight really is about bringing it all together, helping us to better see these relationships more holistically, so that we can understand that we can't just focus on more sustainable transport or just work on reducing waste or on greening the city. We need to see these things and many other transformative actions as a whole, as independent and interconnected, not just with each other, but with our well-being and the well-being of more than human beings. So to delve deeper into this, please welcome Associate Professor Amanda Yates, who's going to introduce her video.
Kia ora mai tātou, no Ngāti Whakaue, nā te rangawiwehe taitanga maha ki runga whakata hoki ahau. Ko Amanda Yates toko ingoa, e rere atu nei ngā mihi, kia koutou. I'm a director of AUT's new Regenerative Architecture program, which is part of the new School of Future Environments at AUT. And we're really looking at trying to change the way our students understand the nature of cities and the nature of the architecture that we're making. I'm also leading an urban wellbeing research program that's funded by the National Science Challenge. And so we're going to show tonight one research output, which is looking at how our cities can improve mauri ora, or social, cultural and ecological wellbeing in a range of different ways. So I think we'll get started. Thank you. Kia ora.
Cities have enormous potential to improve well-being. They can be regenerative, living environments that enhance both human and more than human well-being. To fully realise that potential, we'll need to actively transition from our current polluting, commuting, car-centric cities to an urbanism that puts social and ecological vitality at the centre of urban policy and design. And that transition's already happening. So what does it mean for cities to be regenerative? How can they actively enhance the mauri or holistic well-being of te taio me ngā tangata, of planet and people? We know that our cities and wider culture need to make change in 5 key urban systems. We need to move from ecological degeneration to ecological regeneration, from carbon-based energy to zero carbon energy. We need to move from linear take, make, waste economic systems to circular bio-based economies. And we need to shift from socially, ecologically and spatially disconnected communities to highly connected, resource-filled neighbourhoods. And at the finer grain of the city, our buildings and built environments need to shift from being ecologically unsustainable to being regenerative, as they generate new resource and enhance social and ecological well-being. Our Ngā Tohu Ora Urban Wellbeing Compass visualises this complex urban system change as a well-being centred whole. At the ecological level, cities are already starting to integrate ecologically regenerative, nature-based systems such as sponge spaces, flood-resilient wetlands and rain gardens. And in terms of urban energy, we're starting to put in place zero carbon energy systems. At the level of the economy, businesses and infrastructures are starting to shift from linear to more circular economy practices that aim for zero waste or use biodegradable materials. At the urban level, change is happening as communities and neighbourhoods are being designed for walkability and social and ecological connection. Finally, at the smaller scale, our buildings are beginning to integrate all of these larger system changes into structures with living green roofs, locally generated energy, and lower carbon materials. So let's look at how cities can bring well-being in more detail. Regenerating urban ecosystems has powerful effects on the well-being of whenua and whānau, land and people. If we make our cities more green and blue, with more trees and healthy water environments, we increase the carbon sink capacity of that city, enabling it to draw down more carbon, addressing fossil fuel-driven climate change. By increasing local biodiversity, we can improve the life support capacity, the productivity, resilience and health of the ecosystems we all rely on. With green and blue sponge city approaches using trees, wetlands and rain gardens, for example, we can increase urban resilience to floods. And with urban trees and green shading strategies, we can increase resilience to extreme heat events. We know that natural environments have huge positive effects on our own human well-being. Research shows that access to green and blue space can reduce depression and stress and improve brain acuity and attention. Our breathing slows in greener spaces, leading to a calming response as our parasympathetic or rest digest nervous system switches on. We can heal quicker when exposed to natural environments. Urban spaces, parks, community gardens, other green spaces can be important sites of social, cultural connection, which also brings well-being. encourage wellbeing from social connection. Wellbeing or Māori-centred cities can be designed and developed to build urban resilience and the social, economic and ecological vitality so needed at this time of change. Mauri oho, mauri tu, mauri ora ki a tātou, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e.
Thanks, Amanda, for so effectively setting the scene, and apologies to those online who lost the sound from the video. Please, could you welcome all our speakers so that this is accurate? Could you please welcome all our speakers onto the stage?
Kia ora tātou. Koe ahau, ko Courtney Bennett tōku ingoa. So my name's Courtney Bennett. I'm going to be looking after our panel today. More about me a bit later, but we're going to jump straight into Joseph, if I can get you to share your kōrero with us.
Ka pai. Kia ora tātou, ko waiau e tūāke e nei. Maunga tere ki ronga, waimakarere te awa, e rere ana ki te Āti Haunui, Tūāhuriri te takata, tuahiwi toku marae. Ngāti Hinematua, Ngāi Tūāhuriri, oku hapu, ko Joseph Hullen tōku ingoa. Just watching the video, at the end of it, I just had to say kia ora. Because everything I saw encapsulate everything I've been doing for the last 12 years. So following the Canterbury earthquakes, at Tūāhuriri we entered into a memorandum of understanding with the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority as part of a treaty relationship. And our runanga, we established, or they nominated from the floor, a number of people to act as cultural advisors for a group called Matapōpiri, who would provide cultural advice and guidance during the rebuild of Christchurch. Tough gig, because none of the buildings were ours, none of the money was ours, but we had to impress upon the developers and the Crown and Council and the public of Christchurch that some of the values and some of the things that we wanted to see integrated into these buildings was beneficial to the community, more tātou, for all of us. Just happened that it was looking through a cultural lens. I've seen on social media over the last little while that it said that a whakapapa doesn't give anybody a right to dictate about resource management and how to care for stuff. Well, actually, I disagree. I come from a line of people who migrated from island group to island group over the last 10 or 12,000 years and went through the same process over and over again. Find a new home, settle, populate, overpopulate, deplete the resources, reach a tipping point. Do I stay, do I go? We kept going. Arrived in the last major archipelago in the world, settled it, populated it, and then waved kia ora to a bunch of visitors. And that's the process that continues on today. My ancestors got used to living within finite resources for an uncertain period. And so we got used to a kaitiakitanga, a stewardship ethos. Make everything last as long as you can. Repurpose it over and over again. My paua had a saying on when you butchered a pig, could eat everything but the oink, boy. Even birds that we ate, or that we caught and killed to eat the flesh, keep the feathers, use them for clothing, keep the bones, use them for tools. Use everything, repurpose it. During the Christchurch Canterbury rebuild, we had an example, an exemplar project that we could point to about how Ngāi Tahu put its money where its mouth is in think green. The council buildings are a repurposed old building. Rather than demolish it, we gutted it and retrofitted it. Saved a lot of embedded carbon. Saved a lot of pointless emissions. Cement, concrete mixers, trucks, this and that. Refitted the building, turned it into the first 6-star Green Star building in New Zealand. Why? Because we have this thing, kaitiakitanga, and this attitude, more tātou, for all of us. Not just for me, more tātou, for all of us, the collective. Can we impact the well-being of people by the way we build cities? Yes, we can. The underpinning whakatauki of Matapōpiri was kia atawhai ki te iwi, care for your people, a range of people. People from the likes of my mum's generation who are 84 and want to navigate the city to go shopping and go and visit their friends and get home safely in a timely manner, to the likes of my partner who is not a Canterbury native and who has anxiety issues, or our moko, who's just a young boy. When he comes to visit in the city, he wants stuff to do that keeps him busy and tuckers him out, so that by the time he goes home to his parents, he's had such an enjoyable time that he sleeps off the first day in recovery. By utilising the simple stuff like shade and trees and the feeling of grass to get away, to escape the oppressive heat of a northwest Canterbury day. All of those things. We advocated for them. Simple things like looking at the river through a different set of eyes. Instead of looking at it as a uniform width, uniform depth stormwater drain that moves stormwater away from the city and out to sea in times of major flood events, actually take a look at the interface and see the life that exists in there. Look at the river through your puku. Think of the fish species that you could eat. Would you dare to eat them? Part of the stuff that we wanted from Matapōpiri to impose on council and developers, rain gardens. Treat your stormwater on site before your water goes into the river. Leave it in a better state than you find it. Clean, abundant, fresh water for our kids to swim in. I advocate for that everywhere I go. The beauty of it is the water doesn't know the colour of the hands that dip into it to drink from it. The water doesn't know the colour of the skin of the person who dives in to swim in it. The water doesn't know the colour of the hands that cooks the fish that came out of the river. There's no cultural boundary. This is more tātou. And being able to say that, from my perspective to you, that enhances my well-being. This is an advocacy issue. Now, going back to what I said about we arrived here at the last archipelago in the world to settle and overpopulate. There's no more archipelagos, you know. We're talking about circular economies instead of growth economies. Government wants 8% growth. What for? More people coming into New Zealand to do what? Jobs that we're too lazy to do? Taking up what? Space for other people in a housing crisis? A growth economy, to have residential apartments that are empty, who serve a purpose as an Airbnb. Where's the manaaki on that? Go online, a contactless process where you move from your place of residence to your holiday location without even engaging with the person that you stay with. There's no manaakitanga on that. So we can build a city that benefits well-being, but there's an essential part of the city that's required that you can't build using materials. And it comes with an attitude and a value called whanaungatanga. And so you have to have a sense of community that goes with your city to enhance your well-being. So that you know that as you go out for a walk at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday night, or a Monday and Tuesday night, that you can walk home in peace, relaxed, without fear of being provoked or chased or any of that stuff. That sense of community that actually your neighbour's keeping an eye out for you, that you're keeping an eye out for somebody else. Whanaungatanga, not just for me, more tātou, all of us. Ka pai?
Thank you for that, Joseph. Can I get our next speaker to introduce themselves and share their opening kōrero with us?
Kia ora tātou. Same kia ora to that video, kia ora to Joseph's kōrero there. Ko Anna Stevenson toko ingoa. I am a public health physician, and I'm going to speak to a much more biomedical view of this. All of these things I'm totally in favour of, but I'm just going to speak to a much more narrow spectrum tonight. In an earlier stage of my career, I was a general practitioner, and I saw individuals and maybe small families in my office in the general practices where I worked around the country. I was quite good at it. I was good at giving evidence-based advice to the people in front of me, the sort of advice that they needed, like stop drinking so much alcohol, smoke less cigarettes, get more exercise, sleep a bit more, even maybe take the medicines that I'm prescribing for you. That would be helpful. But I realised over time that it wasn't very easy. This very obvious, very evidence-based, but it wasn't necessarily very easy for people to follow my advice. And the more I thought about that, the more obvious it became to me, something that's very obvious to all of you, that people don't make choices in a vacuum. And this health map is one way of thinking about the environments that people make choices in. So if we think about a child being born with a certain genetic inheritance, those genes are expressed and regulated by factors often from generations before. So the nutritional experience of your grandparents will impact on that baby being born and how their health is. That baby is nurtured by a specific whānau group who will feed it certain foods, too much or not enough of them. They will expose it to certain air quality, maybe cigarette smoke, maybe not. That whānau will live in a particular neighbourhood, which makes it easy for them to get to church, to shops, to work, to study, by using their bodies, walking, cycling, public transport, or they might live in a neighbourhood where they are forced to buy some sort of motor vehicle to get them to the places that they need to go to. Don't have time to go through the whole map, but you can see that the built environment is one layer of that map. And I do want to focus on the outside layer, the global ecosystem, and just make the point that we new human being is born into a particular ecosystem which is created by decisions made by people generations before they were even thought of. So whatever choices that child makes in its life are strongly influenced by factors a long way out of its control. And very often they don't realise it, and very often we don't realise that. So this slide puts two different environments together. And these are extreme contrasts, just to make the point, that the built environment shapes behaviour. So if you're born into an Amish family in Pennsylvania in the United States, just doing your everyday life, by the end of the day you'll have got at least 20,000 steps. If you're allowed to have a pedometer, it would be there. But if you were born in Los Angeles, then you won't be walking that much. You'll be driving or being driven. And your body will be impacted by that choice that's actually been made for you. So you're constrained, those choices are constrained by the environment that you live in. This is a slide from a health needs assessment that was presented to the board of Te Whatu Ora in August of this year. The actual report isn't yet available to us all. The key point I want to make for our discussion today is that our population is growing and it is getting older. And the rise in numbers and proportion of people over 70 is dramatic. And ageing is one of those choices that you have no choice over. We all are ageing. We have all become much more aware of the challenge of infectious diseases since the COVID pandemic started, and it hasn't gone away. Over 1,000 people will die this year alone from COVID in New Zealand. alongside infectious diseases is the ongoing challenge of what in medicine we call non-communicable diseases. This is 2016 data, and it estimates that 87% of the leading causes of health loss in our country are non-communicable diseases. And by this we mean cancer, heart diseases, blood vessel diseases, diabetes, amongst many others. Increasing age on its own is a risk factor for all of these non-communicable diseases. And on this slide you can see many of the other risk factors. They include the things that I used to give good advice about: diet, obesity, tobacco use, excessive alcohol use, inadequate physical activity. The 2023 Health Needs Assessment, which updates that slide, states that alcohol use in 15 to 49-year-olds is the leading risk factor for health loss in our community. Some 20% of New Zealanders drink excessively and hazardously, and that leads to liver disease, several cancers, mental illness, and other injuries. So one way of dividing this all up is into these four factors, and the health sector that I'm a part of, Te Whatu Ora, that's the yellow section up there, and the rest of it is everything outside of what I call the disease management system. Social and economic factors, health behaviours, health choices, and the physical environment. And if we look at how those factors influence health and well-being, I'm behind on my slides, am I? No, there we go. When we think about those choices, that I keep talking about these choices, these health behaviours, and my argument is that those behaviours don't happen in a vacuum. And I think those behaviours and choices are strongly influenced by social and economic factors, by where you live, the built environment, and by the physical environment that you live in. So I think that those purple and yellow factors drive that green section, and then the teal section is left to sort of try and mop it all up. So to reinforce that point, those health behaviours, those health choices, what you eat, what you drink, how you exercise, the air that you breathe, those health behaviours cause the risk factors that lead to the non-communicable diseases that we in the disease management sector are really concerned about. You have limited choice around those health behaviours you can practice, but you have no choice about ageing. And ageing is in itself a risk factor for non-communicable diseases. So this slide is just one of those NCDs that we're interested in. This is diabetes. And what this evidence, which again was given to Te Whatu Ora this August, shows that the prevalence of type 2 diabetes is rising, and it's rising because of age, and it's rising because of excess weight. Now, I completely accept that weight is a very complex area, but in very broad terms, excessive weight is caused by eating too much of the wrong sorts of food and not getting enough of the right sorts of exercise for your body. And in New Zealand, we are looking at around 20,000 new cases of type 2 diabetes every year. And when I say cases, as opposed to diagnoses, what I mean is that many of those people won't know that they are diabetic, and so therefore they won't be getting treated, which may or may not be a good thing, because in the next slide, there we go. Going backwards and forwards here. In the next slide, it's a report from the Diabetes Foundation and Diabetes New Zealand from 2021. And this very comprehensive report, which pointed out that by 2040, if nothing changes, 10% of the Vote Health budget will be spent just on this one disease, type 2 diabetes. And that's medications, that's surgery for conditions like sight-threatening conditions, like ulcers that aren't healing, the need for amputation of limbs because of that, strokes, heart attacks. These are just some of the many manifestations of diabetes, of poorly controlled diabetes. But if you have diabetes, or if you know somebody with diabetes, you will know that control of diabetes is very, very difficult and not always possible. So this is just one of the reasons why clinicians are concerned about ageing in New Zealand. The next slide could be a whole presentation in itself. The point I want to show you here is what I call the decade of disability that we are all going to face. So in New Zealand, on average, most of us live to be about 80 years old, but we are healthy on average for only 70 of those years. So there's a decade that we can expect to be not healthy and struggling with our well-being. This slide also speaks to the health and life equity issues between Māori and non-Māori in this country, and as I said, that's a whole other presentation, but very much worth discussing. So, the way that we live, big gap on the slide here. The way that we live and the lifestyle choices that we make are shaped by our environments, especially the built environment. And most of the time we are oblivious to the impact that the built environment has on us. This guide, I've got a copy down there on the table, the Integrated Planning Guide, was co-designed by people from the City Council here, urban designers, urban planners, environmentalists, many different people came together to pull this together. And I guess what I'm asking for is that in all of the built environment projects that we are planning, that we're dreaming about, and that we're implementing, that we need to factor in all of these considerations if we really want to make sure that our taha wairua, our taha hinengaro, taha tinana, and taha whānau, that we really do achieve well-being in those spaces. If we don't think about this right at the beginning of the project, we're not going to get it done properly. And my final slide is just making the point that our health is our wealth, individually and at a population level. The way that we design and build our cities is a critical enabler of health and well-being, or of disease and the opposite of well-being. This is true not just for people, but it is true for the planet that we live in and on and with. And we can talk more later, perhaps.
Thank you, that was really interesting, particularly the points around how the decisions we make today impact the health of future generations in ways that they might not be able to impact themselves. So that was really cool. I'd like to introduce Malcolm to give your kōrero.
My name's Malcolm Long, Pākehā, previously from Auckland. I've described it to people as the 30 wasted years. Currently Secretary of the Ōpāwaho Heathcote River Network, a happily retired teacher. I want to just make touch on four quick themes tonight. This is us, been around for a little while, not very long. We've got quite a few members, not too many, but most importantly, we've got about 25 or so community groups. They are what we might call our superpowers. They do the hard mihi on the ground. But the important thing here is how we work. We call this our Oreo diagram. It shows, the top layer, the decision makers, and the people doing the hard graft underneath, held together by this cream that is nice and sweet. But the most important words here are relationships. That's why it's down there twice, I guess. And that's a theme that's come through a lot. It's all about relationships. We're talking about well-being, whether it's the well-being of the river, the well-being of the city, or ourselves. It's all about relationships. And just very quickly on that theme, we act as we like to think, a community voice for the river. We're talking about the regeneration of the health of the river, and we're talking about connecting and supporting the communities along the river that work along the river. So that's why its relationships are so important. Second point I want to make is well-being with waterways, anyway, is a two-way thing. We had 100 years of the Christchurch Drainage Board working to drain Christchurch, and for good reason, because it was a very unhealthy city until they started to do that. And they dug drains and put pipes underground, and eventually we had a whole lot of structures, and here's one of them coming up. Nice concrete-lined drain coming through a park. There's lots of other ones, wood-lined ones, pipes underground. This is what we ended up with. In the 1980s, perhaps encouraged by the ecological disaster of the Woolston Cut, but also because maybe its time was just come, and also in the City Council at that time there was some very far-thinking people, many of whom are still around, although probably not working in the council, who decided that naturalising was the way to go, naturalising our waterways. And Christchurch is very fortunate to have so many waterways, and they developed the 6 values approach, cutting edge, still cutting edge, where dealing with waterways is about not only drainage, but ecology, landscape, recreation, and all the rest. And so we apply those to our waterways, and one of the outcomes is an improved habitat for flora and fauna. But that's what it looks like after you've applied the naturalisation. And I want you to look at those 2 pictures and just think, what is your emotional response to those? But there may be some people who find this really attractive, but I suspect all of us tend to be along this line here. Unfortunately, there's not enough of it. There are several examples, many examples in the city. I've just got a few here. Here it is in the Papanui Stream and Erica Reserve. Some of you may know it. Here it is after it's been naturalised. Here it is currently, well, not very long ago, as a farm drain up by Sutherland's Road, the Kashmir Stream. Here it is now, just the other day, naturalised. I think we all tend to have an emotional response to that. That's part of our well-being. And so it's a two-way thing. If we restore our waterways, they help restore us. The third thing is about being involved. So here's one of those little community groups that I talked about. We are currently, the OHRN is currently being researched by the Cawthorne Institute, who are doing some research under the National Science Challenges. And they've interviewed a lot of people who work with the network, and they haven't published their research yet, but there is a number of themes that are coming through from their responses. And I want to just touch on these. I might enlarge on them later. But people talk about being able to be connected. They talk about taking notice of their surroundings, of the parts of the world around them. They talk about being active, this idea of active hope, that the global problems are so vast you can't do anything about them, but you can do something locally small at hand that gives you hope. That gives you opportunity to give, and it allows you to keep learning. I'm going to come back to those things, but not coincidentally, they are the 5 ways to well-being that the Mental Health Foundation promotes. It comes out of some UK research. And then the last thing I want to mention is this, and it's in some ways been mentioned throughout from that wonderful video and Joseph's comment as well. We all benefit from a Māori worldview of the oneness of everything, whether it's waterways or the wider environment. And the more that we can embed that in the ways we act in the city, the better for us all.
Oh, thank you very much. I've just learned a new favourite term, active hope. How cool is that? It's something we may need in the next few years. So, who am I and why have I been given this microphone? It's a great question, I ask it myself. As I said earlier, my name's Courtney Bennett. On paper, I'm here because I am a planner. I've lived here for nearly 10 years now, originally also from Auckland. Introduced myself as Christchurch's only blues supporter. I've worked in environmental planning and all of those areas for the whole time I've been down here, which, as I said, on paper might be why I'm here. The real reason I'm here is my mother says I came out of the womb asking questions, and now I get to do it on purpose. So let's crack into our questions today. Just a reminder for those that wanted to submit your own questions. We have a phone number coming up in 5. There we go. If you have any questions, text them to that number and someone will wave me down frantically when they come through. Otherwise, we have some that we've prepared earlier. So a wise person once said the very beginning is a very good place to start. So our first question, which I'll direct to all of us, is what does well-being mean to you? And how do our urban spaces and the way we live in them impact that well-being? Who wants to take a stab first?
I can start. Yeah, I guess I approach well-being from a holistic point of view, from an Indigenous and regenerative approach, where you really understand that well-being is an integrative condition. When you're a human being living on a planet, we can't be well unless the planet is also well. So for me, social, cultural and ecological well-being are always interconnected. Yeah, and if we look at cities and well-being, we know currently our cities are linear. They're not well suited to the circular planet that we live on, and they're not sustainable in their current form. So there's enormous potential for cities to really orient towards MODI, towards holistic well-being, social, cultural and ecological well-being, in a way that really is regenerative in all sorts of ways. And the exciting thing, I guess, at this time is we are already starting to see some quite important exemplars, some case studies. We're starting to see different ways by which there is very big transitions already happening in the cities that we're living in New Zealand. So it's a time of hope for me, given that I've been sort of working with this stuff most of my life and been thinking nothing's happening. Really in the last 3 or 4 years there's been some really big shifts. So, yeah.
It's very hard for a city to engender well-being unless it breaks itself down into communities and that those communities are somehow coordinated. So there has to be a real passion for a community and for the community to be driving the move. And so our leaders have to be receptive to that if it's going to work.
So it has to aggregate from the ground up.
It doesn't have to,
start
but
at the top and go down.
It's not going to work unless the community is involved. Yeah.
I'd dispute the idea that the city can't help you with well-being.
This is what we're here for, guys.
Once again, it's about creating the environments that support the choices you want to make. So if we're looking for community, which I think everybody here has agreed that that's a really important part of most people's well-being. And you think about the slide that I put up where you had the Amish people walking along and then you had the LA freeways. Which of those two, they're extremes obviously, but which of those two is going to generate more community or more engagement, more conversation with people around you? I think it's pretty obviously the Amish side of things. And in our city, Scott's just been talking to me today on LinkedIn and here today about how he wants to be out and about walking, but he has some physical struggles. And as do many people, and I talked in that slide about that decade of disability, that everybody will have at some point in their life, some time when they struggle to get around. But we can make it easier for people by having footpaths in place. We can, in paths that are wide enough to push your wheelchair if you need that, or you take your buggies with your children in them. By having seats carefully spaced so that if you just need to stop and have a break, that you can do that, and hopefully you space them in places where you can appreciate the river, the view, the trees, and the shade. A chair in the bright shining sun is not as good as a chair with some shade over it. So the detail stuff is really important, and I think you absolutely can make a city that encourages and supports community, or you can make a city that absolutely does not. Yeah.
What do you think, Joseph?
I guess if I consider my own well-being, I look at it as a kind of a profit and loss column. I'm balancing it all out between are the joys more numerous than the irritants day to day. At the stage in life I am now, I mean, I'm comfortable that I'm doing everything that I can to leave this place in a better state by the time I shuffle away. But there are some aspirational goals I have to see that we're making progress. I facetiously said once at Conservation Week, at the opening of Conservation Week, that I want to eat a kakapo.
I bet that went down great.
And my logic is quite simple, that if I can have a cultural harvest of a kakapo, which when I arrived back in New Zealand for my AOE, there were 56, and now there's over 200, nearly 300, then by the time they're sustainable, nobody will care if Joseph Hullen takes one surreptitiously. I've been on the Conservation Board for 11 conservation ministers, right? That's a level of my commitment. I've lowered my aspirational goal to hearing the sound of a tui in Kaiapoi. I was born and raised in Kaiapoi. I'll be 62 next birthday. I've never heard a tui call in my own hometown. Do you know, hands up if you've heard a tui call. You know that duk sound they make, that glok. So over the last 3 weeks, at 3 different marae, not mine, I've been tormented by the sound of tuis. So they've actually been an irritant while they've been joyous as well. So that's a profit and loss. It's always about, there'll always be something that irritates me, and I hope that there's something being done that counterbalances that.
And it's really interesting the way that you've linked the environmental well-being of the taiao, the environment being a way that can host tui, to your own well-being of being able to get the enjoyment of being part of that environment and how that impacts other aspects of your well-being. I see we have our first question.
First, oh sorry, thanks Ben, that's a bit loud.
Asserting dominance.
There's a lot of questions, which is great. A lot of them are about the how, not the what. The first one is, it really is about mō tātou, like how do you encourage a positive, intellectually brave pluralism, is their wording, or rather a search for a common ground, because...
So is this linked to some questions we were talking about earlier about how do you have these conversations with your grandpa uncle at Christmas?
Possibly. I think it's more about creating, a shared sense of value, if I'm allowed to interpret this person's question.
How do we get everyone on the waka?
Yeah.
I have an answer to that.
Oh.
Apart from me, because I'm actually a faux pas, hands up if you have children. Hands up if you have grandchildren. There's your commonality. Right? I don't have kids, right? And I talk about mō tātou, mō ka uri a muri ake nei, not just for us, but those who come after us. I don't do it because I've got a legacy that I want to pass on to tamariki mokopuna. I do this because I believe in it, right? And there's no payoff to me. The only payoff will be one day, when I get out of the car in Kinnersley Street, and finally, I'll probably have a heart attack and die. But that's the payoff. And so everybody's got to be brave enough to actually say, you know what, bugger it. I'm going to talk to that person next door. I'm going to help them do a bit of mihi, because what they're doing, planting there, is, I think, is going to be beneficial. You know, you've got to take your blinkers off and not be scared, and actually put yourself out there and get involved.
Yep. That's exactly right, Joseph. You've got to take that leap to say, well, I'm going to do something. Yeah. Even if it's only a very small thing, even if it's only just setting up a water garden in your own backyard, or talking with your neighbour about pulling down the fence and sorting out the drainage between you. or going and joining that work day planting. You have to do something, and in that doing, you will talk with people, and it's the interactions, it's those relationships. That's the only way to develop any sort of shared, and it's never going to be one view. That's the truth of it.
And it's occurring at different scales as well. So that question's really important, the how, because we've sort of known what to do really since the 1970s. We have 50 years of knowing what to do, and it hasn't been done. It's very hard to shift the inertia of big cultural systems, economic systems. And I think it is both working at a sort of community level is really important, flex roots, but also really starting to shift those higher governance levels as well, sort of working, from the top down and the bottom up together. And having a shared understanding of what we're actually aiming for is really important too. It's a very complex system change process we're engaged in. We've never redesigned human culture mindfully before. And if we don't have a clear picture of what we're aiming for, it's really hard to land it. And we can't do it just by focusing on one thing, because this is a complex living system. It's multifactorial. We've got to be able to address multiple things at the same time. And that is the value of having a positive aim for holistic well-being, for social, cultural, ecological well-being. So it really helps us to conceptualise, but also really practically land change. Yeah.
And in some ways, taking that at a practical level, aiming low and high, aiming locally and at the policy level too, we can all do something there. You can submit to the policy gurus. Getting involved there, it's horrible. It's in some ways
Come on, planning's not hard.
It's hard, but it's worth doing. And if the community voice isn't heard there, then industry wins out or the developers win out. So getting the community to submit their voice, or for the ground up community swell of voice to be heard, it's really important.
And that change is happening also, isn't it? At a governance level, councils are very mindful. They need to engage in more deliberative sort of democratic processes. And I think there's some really great examples of councils that are doing that.
They want to hear more.
I'm going to
Can I put in
jump
a plug?
in here.
I just want to put in a plug for this book, which I had on a slide, and which you can access. And it's really it's for those moments when you think, I don't know what to do. I don't know what question to ask. I don't know. I'm not an expert in rivers. I'm not an expert in te ao. And this is not obviously the expert book either, but it gives you lots of questions to ask, and it just makes it simple for you to work your way through whatever process or policy you're considering, and try and do that multi-solving thing that we're looking
Where
for.
can we find that?
You can find it on the website. I think it's on this. It was on this. Put the link on the slide.
Fantastic.
We'll send it out.
We'll send that out.
Yeah.
Next question from the floor.
Well, it's interesting, you've all mentioned things that people have asked questions about. So people have asked questions about our systems of governance and community engagement. And what kind of local government reform do you think is essential for building better cities that improve well-being?
It's about the vision, isn't it? It is about. This is where democracy comes in. What sort of city do you want? What are the people that you're voting for? What vision are they presenting? And take them seriously on that. So vote. I think we've had 20% of the country who didn't vote in the last elections. If they had, who knows where it would have gone, but voting is something that's open to everybody, and we should make the most of it.
To go along with that, just want to plug, even though it's apparently horrible, submit on public engagement opportunities. It might not be the most exciting thing. It might not get your heart racing like planting a tree or going bird watching or things like that, but councils and elected members can only really work what you tell them. And if you don't tell them anything, your crazy mate down the road definitely is, as a planner. I spent last weekend reading public submissions, and I really wish that there were a wider range of views. Anyway, that's my plug.
And it's actually quite simple because you can say anything, and that's one of the great
and they
things
do.
about being
They
a
absolutely do.
community. A community voice is you can say anything. Industry has to do it in certain ways, but the community, you can say absolutely anything. So say it, and the more voices that say it, the better.
You can submit by interpretive dance. Honestly, I've seen it.
I think one of the things too that we need to demystify and probably exercise from people's thought process is that co-governance is bad. Mm-hmm. So I'm the current chair of Te Kohaka Tū Haitara Trust, and Te Kohaka manages the coastal wetland park between the Waimakariri River and the Ashley Rakahuri River for about 1 kilometre, 2 kilometres at its widest point. And so, so it's centred on Tūtaipatu Lagoon, which came into Ngāi Tahu as part of our treaty settlement. It was one of the 3 locations that were considered the die in the ditch places because it's a burial ground for one of our significant ancestors. Since my tenure arriving on the board, we've accumulated, well, our last annual report, so we're valued at about $11 million in assets, mostly land and trees. We've got no intention of selling one stick, 1 inch of ground, right? Even though we manage it. Absolutely no thought about it. Water assets? No way. Why would you sell control of an essential to you, your tamariki and your mokopuna? So when we go into co-governance arrangements, it's as a treaty partner relationship, which gives us a special situation. But we advocate for the generation coming past us. So it's not for us, right? It's for the benefit of the board that we sit on, the governance that we perform. There are a number of significant co-governance arrangements that exist in the South Island that have functioned perfectly for 10, 15, 20, 25 years without any spotlight being shone on them. Politicians shone the light on co-governance because of 3 waters with the threats of wholesale sales. That was rubbish. If you look at the co-governance arrangements that are working around the country, they are to the benefit of the whole community. And we would be one place. We would also expect that there are community representatives. So on the co-governance arrangement at Te Kohaka, there are 3 Tūāhuriri trustees or 3 Ngāi Tahu trustees, and there are 3 community trustees. And we have a general manager who's the deciding vote. It's perfect co-governance.
Yeah, I think, both local and central government, as important as democracy is, there's really structural issues with the sort of very quick turnarounds, which means it's really hard to sort of focus to an issue before someone new comes in and things pivot. And we really have to have that intergenerational lens. We have to have an ecological lens. We have to have a transition lens that just holds in place regardless of what new sort of groups are coming in. And that's a major impediment at the moment to landing change because there's so much churn in the governance system. Yeah. And, I think that's complex, but that's doable to set a kind of longer term multi-party agreements. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's actually vital that we start to talk about how that might land. Yeah.
Oh, there are more. I don't know if the interpretive dance question is going to answer this. You can feel the frustration in this question where someone's saying, well, how do I make time for all of this? How do other people make time to contribute to these kinds of improvements where we're all stuck working too much and doing too much?
Yeah.
So, in my own experience, and my partner will shoot daggers at me, so it's a juggling act, okay? And at the start, you will juggle your priorities very clumsily. You'll have relationship, you'll have work, you'll have children, you'll have friends, and then you'll have kaupapa that you're really interested in. And that's 5 just to start with. And trying to juggle them and keep them moving is a difficult task, organisationally, and I'm terrible at it. I'm absolutely terrible at it. But
She's nodding.
I can see some nodding over there.
eventually you'll get to the stage where you're looking and there's a glass and a ping pong ball and a loaf of bread and a chainsaw that's running, and you're looking at the jug of water over on the table thinking, how would that look as I move them gracefully through the air? You'll manage.
And it is, yeah. Sounds good.
We've got a
Sounds
roving
good.
mic
Yeah.
if you'd like to.
Yeah, I mean, and it's personal and it's political, right? So it's we always have to be thinking about the structural systems that are in place. As individuals, we cannot impede or shift these massive cultural frameworks that are in place. So we have to be looking to change those as well. And simple example, a more circular or regenerative economies that maybe focus on 4-day weeks. There's a lot of research that shows that actually you can reduce the amount of work that you're doing and actually be more productive. And New Zealand has a real problem with productivity. We are, it's bums on seats model rather than actually getting the work done. If you're doing a 4-day week, you've got a free day to engage in looking after your own health and contributing to the community. So that's a really significant example of how, if we make some structural change in our kind of economic system, we can really start to shift the larger system also. Yeah, and we can really enhance individual and community well-being. Yeah.
And lots of people making small contributions makes a big contribution.
Huge,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
most of the community groups working along the river operate on a sort of a once a month for an hour and a half sort of basis, maybe more often. But and some people are involved in more than one. But at that point, you can start to make an impact on a small area that you feel great about with other people, and then that spreads, and it may occupy a lot of your life, but it may not.
And because we followed this example where we stampede in unison, off to work, turn around, off home, and so we're all creating the pinch points that's driving and frustrating us. And so any kind of change where we stretch out the time that we're actually in motion, so that we're not all in motion at the same time, utilising the same space, actually time and offset. So, I might want to work Saturdays and Sundays because, like everybody else, has got 3-day weekends. I'll work Saturdays, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I have Monday, Tuesday off, and Wednesday. So we need to be a bit flexible and change it instead of all of a sudden everything I see lately is that we just all, like sheep, go on, but like mindless people just go running towards something, whether it be farming intensification. All of a sudden the Canterbury Plains is full of dairy conversions, and then it goes from dairy conversions, we're going broke. Residential subdivisions. We turn the Canterbury Plains and we're farming residential subdivision, 1/4-acre sections.
Yeah.
And we'll get to the stage where there's nothing. I'll be long gone by then. God, I hope I don't see it. There'll be no refuge here to get away from the bullshit.
I'd also like to offer, not that I'm really supposed to, but here we are, that we work to our strengths. Everybody can contribute in different ways and it's going to look different for everyone. I know for myself, useless at tree planting. They will all die. Waste of money. But what I can do is help my friends and family put together templates so that they can submit en masse on things. That's something that I find easy. Some of my friends and family might rather do anything than that. But it could be as small as sharing a link to something on social media or having that awkward chat with your neighbour or something so little. But just as long as we work to our strengths and don't expect ourselves to be able to have massive impact in every single sphere. And just give ourselves some grace in that sense, that we're doing our best with what we can, with how we can. Yeah.
Yep, totally agree. I think we can't obviously all do everything, but we can do something. And I do think part of the big systems that you're talking about, almost if we think about them as having a Māori of their own, some of the negative thing that they do to us is make us feel completely useless, and it's so easy to get really overwhelmed. And but just one thing can shift that system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have we got any more questions coming through?
There are more questions. I've lost one that was about, I don't know how I've lost it, but I've lost one that was about chicken coops and developers. And I think the suggestion was that chicken coops and developers are bad for people's well-being. But there's one here about how do you connect younger people to this work and to this vision for making a more healthier, more sustainable city.
They're connecting themselves, would you guys agree?
Oh, we have no trouble getting younger people to be involved. They've got so many other things on their plates, of course, that it's difficult. But once they are focused, they want to be involved.
I think it's really important that we model what we're asking them to do. And it's all very well for us to say you shouldn't, you've got to reduce your carbon emissions while we're flying off to Europe every 3 months for something or other, conference or a holiday or something. How can they take that seriously, and how? Yeah. So, I think we need to, if we want our young people to do the right things, then we need to think what the right things are for ourselves as well.
And if by young we mean...
people younger than us.
Oh, that young. People who are in training after school age, perhaps reducing their debt burdens somehow would be a good way of giving them alternative time to be involved in their communities.
That one got a clap as well, I heard.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the younger generation are here already. It's actually the older generations who are impeding, and it's more a case of perhaps we older people stepping to the side or using our power to sort of leverage change in support of them. Yeah.
I want to apologise for my generation.
I'd like to flip that question around and say, how would we get some people who are maybe more stuck in their ways, more used to more traditional ways of shaping our cities, decision-making around well-being, conceptualizations of well-being as a whole, how are some ways that we can have those conversations, particularly for parts of our community that might be prioritising things like economy over things like environmental or social well-being?
Well, I think we have to get real that the economy's done a lot of good for most of us. The economy, whatever that is, there's very few of us that would want to go back 100 years and live in houses with dirt floors and no electricity and be worried about the water we're going to drink every day. And there'll be some here probably who would like that. But most of us actually appreciate the benefits of the capitalist society that we've inherited. And there's a real challenge for us in how do we keep those good things and turn it into that regenerative model. How do we take the carbon out of the system? How do we... But we shouldn't... I don't think it's real to guilt people for enjoying being warm or enjoying having enough food, or we've got to figure out how to do it in ways that are healthy.
Ecology has a way of coming back and biting you if you don't take notice of it, as we're experiencing. So it's going to happen, and people who fight it are going to find that they're on the losing side.
I think our tamariki mokopuna are going to change the attitudes of their parents and grandparents.
Yeah.
Because as they confront what the future looks like for them, it's likely that they'll have the harder conversations that perhaps my generation didn't have with their parents, my parents' generation didn't have with their parents. And I think it's also about considering, so we have this wonderful word, utu, and people think, oh yeah, it's eye for an eye. It's actually not. It's about reciprocity of action. So a like response for a like response. And so in our culture and economies, we had a thing called kai ho kai. So I trade my kai for your kai. So, we were used to commerce, we were used to living in an economy, but we were used to living with just enough, right? With just enough. We've got this greedy attitude in society now, where people are forever clawing and they want to exploit to the nth degree. One of the things I raised in a conversation about white baiting. Oh, you Māoris you've got a cultural season. Yeah, but that just means that I can fish at a time when there's nobody else with my whānau and teach them how to fish sustainably. Everybody else hones the machinery that they use so they become a more effective catching machine, because they want to catch as much as they can in a short amount of, because it's all about return of effort and reciprocity and utu. So they value their time, but they don't value the environment. They want to take from the environment, take, but what are you giving back? Where's the reciprocity of your action? That's what we've got to start considering. And that's the way we've got to start thinking.
Yeah.
The reciprocity of action. So what I get from the environment, how much am I putting back? And going back to how much can you do? And I go back to when I was a boy at Xavier Intermediate, and Mother Teresa made the quote, if you take a spoonful of tears and you tip it into the sea is that much bigger. Might not be in a significant amount in scientific terms, but to the person whose tears they are, it's a significant amount. And so if each of us has got a spoonful of tears to tip into a waterway, that's our contribution. Every journey starts with one step. Are you ready for your journey?
I think that winds us up really nicely. A lot of our kōrero today has been about encouraging us all to do that one thing that we can do and broadening our understanding of what wellbeing is. It's so many different things and they're all so interrelated and in ways that we might not always first think of. But yeah, we're gonna go along the line, creeping death style. And if you could give one person in this audience one thing to go away with, something they can go home and do, what would that be? We're going to start at this end.
I think it is that community engagement. Finding those communities of change around you and contributing to that, because it's good for your own well-being, and because we are actually already in a change process. It's already happening. It's happening for a reason, that a lot of these new approaches are actually cheaper. They bring co-benefits. And we can make change that is better for us in so many different ways. So contributing to that, joining with communities of change, I think is very productive thing to be doing. Yeah.
And you can't repeat what the person before you said.
Oh, I'm glad I was first.
Well, I would say sort of segueing from that to also speak up, be involved, put in that submission, talk to your neighbour, talk to the group that you have lunch with. Try to find the communities of interest that are heading in the direction that this well-being is about.
I think I'd just keep it very practical. I'd go for a walk. Just go for a walk by yourself and try and keep your eyes open and see where you can walk and where you can't walk, and where it might be easy to bring a friend, and then think about that, go for a walk with a friend and do the same exercise. And as you walk, you'll start to hear maybe a tui. You'll start to see what's happening in the river around you, or the river that's not there that should be there. You'll start to see things that might interest your heart, that might provoke you to further action or not. But just walking in itself is good for you, so go for that.
One of you, all of you, plant a kōwhai tree, plant a harakeke, plant a nectar-bearing New Zealand native, wherever you live.
Amen.
Do it weekly, well, monthly.
Yeah.
I want to hear those tuis before I die.
Yep.
And if I can hear them, you can hear them too. How great would that be?
Nice.
Well, a round of applause for our panel.
Oh, kia ora. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to offer, along with, I think, reciprocity of action, which is now going to be my new mantra, private sufficiency and public luxury, I think, which ties in with something Joseph said as well. So thank you all so much, and thank you, Courtney, for facilitating this conversation. We always are now, towards the end of our conversations, invite a local poet to read, because actually, for many of us, arts and culture are also part of this change. So it's my pleasure to welcome Te Reo Māori teacher, writer and musician Isla Huia to share some of her poetry with us.
Kia ora whānau. I didn't really know what I was coming to tonight, but that was really cool and fascinating, so now I know. Ai, erere ana ngā mihi ki a koutou katoa. Kua tuku te tono ki au, ki te haramai tēnei o ngā pō ki te kōrero ki a koutou. No te Āti Haunui a-Pāpārangi no Ngāti Uenuku hoki. Engari, kua tipu ake oi o tautahi. Ko Isla Huia tōku ingoa. I'm Isla. I'm from Te Āti Haunui a-Pāpārangi, Ngāti Uenuku, just like Piperiki, Raitihi, up the Wanganui River. But I've always lived here in Ōtautahi. I'm a te reo teacher at Avonside Girls High School, Te Kura Kohine o Ōtākoro, and a writer. And so I didn't know which poem I would choose for tonight. And after that really hopeful and beautiful ending, seems a bit sad to get a bit depressing, but I think that's what poets do, isn't it? Yeah. Also, funny story, I forgot my own book to read from, and then I texted my partner and said, could you bring it to work and I'll come and get it from you after work, and then she forgot it, and then I went to Scorpio Books to try and buy my own book, and then they said, no, you can't buy your own book, don't be silly, read it off your phone, no one will care. So, aroha mai, I'm reading off my phone. No one cares. Okay, cool. So the poem that I chose, I wrote a few years ago when I did a walking tour with Coca Gallery. So they got people to come along and they got poets to choose a place in Ōtautahi, in Christchurch, in the central city, that they felt some response to, whether it be positive, negative, whatever. And they got us to write these poems about these places and then stationed us in those places and then walked the people from Coca to all of our places. So I wrote a poem about the statue of Godly in Cathedral Square, if you can sense where this might go. It begins with a quote that I didn't write, so just let that be known. Anyway, this is called Godly. In some future day, when this generation is dead and gone, to those who look up inquiringly at this statue, it will be told how the fathers of the colony left their homes and tamed the wildness under the leadership of a man of a heroic type, how when he died, the representatives of the people, appreciating his character, determined to erect a monument worthy of his memory, and how great a sculptor in executing the work impressed it with the stamp of his genius. So shall some old men speak in the aftertime to all the people, winning reverence. And now I may congratulate this city that this statue is about to be handed over to its care, worthy as it is of admiration, like King Arthur's sword of old, not only for the memory of a great man, but the eyes of men, but on account of its own intrinsic beauty, not unlike that sword, to disappear from the eyes of men, but to be preserved by us and our successors as a possession forever. C.C. Bowen, 7th of August, 1867. Godly, you're standing awfully casually up there, warmer layers slung in your crook, looking like your foot wants to accelerate something or stand on something's neck. You're balding now, but have done well to love what's left, a blueprint of my own swelling curls, framing eyes that are hungry, unyielding, for the next swampland that you may conquer, another someplace hot and brown to be the founder of. Frame this as experimental, or really good work, or home. Godly, how's it looking from up there? Since your recent resurrection, you can now see the birds shitting in the rafters. They want to fix that too. Apparently, we are all walking around gutted without a cathedral, headless, bleeding. Well, I'm still upright, same as you. You were the first face of this land to be petrified in bronze, cast in forever, the creation story of Pākehā public art. Oh, where, old koro, I see your oxygen, and your ships, and your associations, and I don't even want to patu you up, or send you shaking at the whites of my eyes. I just want them to stop spending our money on your very dead face, freckled, I imagine, and maybe cracked. I want to munch on your mana, I want to bark at you, I want to rip up the stone and the bins and the benches and plant a pāhara keke and whistle to my bird brothers and my tattooed sisters and my mobsters and my students, all of my students and my knees, and we can all just sit here like the weight of our great mother Ōpāwaho and hold your hand while the dust does settle. E tau, e tau, e tau, e tau. When the first 4 ships came to see what you had made and then live on it, your wife said you didn't know whether to cry or laugh, and so you did both. Godly, did you know my ancestors? What were they like? What did they say to you? Were you kind to them? In me they are immortalized like you in the square chest of the city. I hold them up to the sun and say thank you, one by one, to the bones interred in us, just as the words of this plaque make memory of you. Godly, why don't you lie down just for a little while? Just sleep. Let me see the sky your stomach takes up. Kia ora.
Oh, kia ora, Isla. Thank you so much. I hope you get to plant your pāhara keke. Joseph's going to close for us in a couple of minutes, and we are running slightly over, so apologies for that. But thank you so much to everyone who spoke tonight and who came here to create this event. I want to leave you with, from me, a quote from the biologist Elizabeth Sartoris, who said, "The best life insurance for any species in an ecosystem is to contribute usefully to sustaining the lives of other species." Something I think that could shape how we think about and shape our city. This is also a great opportunity to thank again the supporters of He Whakawhiti Kōrero Christchurch Conversations, the Christchurch City Council, and He Puna Ora Regenerative Action Lab at AUT. As this is the last event of the year, I'd also like to acknowledge my fellow Te Pūtahi team members, in particular Em and Emma, and the tech team for working behind the scenes, and sometimes in front, to bring this into being. Remember, you can find the recording of tonight's event and nearly all previous Christchurch Conversations dating back to 2017 on our YouTube channel if you'd like to share them with others. This might be the last He Whakawhiti Kōrero of the year, but we're back next year, and I would encourage you to mark your diaries for the first Christchurch Conversation of 2024, which will be held here at Tūranga at 6 p.m. So come and hear from an international urbanist from Barcelona, who I don't think I'm allowed to announce yet, who'll be here on Thursday the 7th of March. And also tonight, when you leave, we have to exit via Gloucester Street because they had to close Tūranga early tonight. But I'll leave the last words to Joseph.
Kia ora Jessica, kia ora everybody. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa. Te ata whaia tō tātou āreki a ihu karaiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhi ngā tahitanga, ki te wairua tapu, ake, ake, ameni.